Welcome to plastic waste forum. Sorry, it's been a long day. We had an all-day workshop on plastic waste today with stakeholders from around the world. And we had a half-hour break, and so we're here again to talk more about plastic waste. I want to start by acknowledging that we're on unceded Coast Salish territory and the traditional territories of the Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh community. I think especially on a day like today, we take so much for granted in terms of our natural endowments, the beauty that we have around us in BC, and yet we see halfway around the world the conflagration that threatens all kinds of supply chains and environmental disasters if it unfolds as the president is threatening in the next 2 weeks. Let's hope it doesn't go that way. Today, we're going to talk about plastics. One of the things that might come out of a potential conflict in the Middle East is a jacking up of oil prices and LNG prices. And as you know, fossil fuels are the feedstock for producing plastics. So not that I would be happy about it, but the fact is that the price of plastics is just too cheap. Virgin plastics or new plastics are really cheap. So it's extremely difficult for us to develop secondary or reuse markets. And now, you all know if you have beverage containers, you can take them to your deposit center and you get 10 cents back. But the problem is that there are many different types of plastic, most of which do not have a deposit on them. And even the ones that do have a deposit aren't fully returned. But before we get to a discussion about that, I have to also acknowledge the sponsorship of SFU, the Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions, Zero Waste BC, and the Recycling Council of BC. And I want to thank Christoph Schultz from Recycling Council BC and Sue Maxwell of Zero Waste BC for helping me to organize today's events. So we have three speakers with us after my brief introduction, and they'll have brief kind of 15-minute presentations about their perspective on plastics. And then we'll just open it up for discussion, Q&A, what questions you have or that you might want to follow up on. So plastics are really an amazing material. Whenever I introduce students to how we got into this pickle on climate change, I always talk about the magical properties of petroleum. There just is nothing cheaper in terms of providing bang for the buck in terms of energy power and being able to transport it easily, create global markets around it easily. Even though the technology for recycling renewable energies is competitive now with fossil fuels, especially if we consider the cost of pollution, we haven't seen yet a robust market. We don't have strong enough policies to create a robust market in renewable energy. But imagine if, in Japan, where they're 100% dependent on LNG, or in Asia, in South Korea, or in China, if they could really switch to renewable energy, we wouldn't be so obsessed with the Middle East if that was the case. It would really relieve a lot of geopolitical problems for all of us, and would really wind down a lot of conflicts that have been inherent in our global economy for over 100 years now. The main problem with renewable energy is lack of long-term storage capacity. So probably until batteries become cheaper and they have a longer duration, we're probably going to have some mix of LNG and renewable energy because, the sun's not always shining, the wind is not always blowing. But we could do a lot better than we have so far. There's no reason for any economy to be dependent so exclusively on LNG. Renewable energy in places like Texas, in places like Iowa, red states, it's at least 20% of their energy mix, and it's continually rising, despite the fact that President Trump is also interfering in markets to dampen and slow down the introduction of renewable energy. So we do have solutions for petroleum and fossil fuels, but we don't have solutions for plastic. Plastic is a byproduct of petroleum. It contributes to about 3.5% of GHGs, and therefore it's a part of the petroleum supply chain. It's adding to climate change, but like petroleum, plastic has magical materials. So, as you know, when we look around everywhere, we have plastic everywhere. When you're on a flight, you can look at the seat in front of you. It's all plastic. Look at your dashboard in your car. It's plastic. So it has different levels of firmness. It's hydrophobic, right? It's water resistant. It's super durable, fortunately, in some ways, because as you know, plastic never really goes away unless you burn it like they do in Japan. It breaks down and went to most of the plastic, especially in the global south. It's going into large landfills, or it's being burned, or just open dumping. It's not really being treated. It's going into the rivers, the Ganges River. It's going into the Indian Ocean, and then it's coming right back into us. And when we eat seafood, we're ingesting all those plastic micro and nano particles. And the truth is that we don't really know what the long-term effects of those are. There's increasing evidence, like there is for fossil fuels, for petroleum, that those will have a direct impact on people. I'm not sure if you've heard about this area around Baton Rouge, around Louisiana. They call it Cancer Alley because it's in the area of petrochemical refineries. So we know just from observation that when you're close to refineries, that's why there's a NIMBY effect around them. People don't want refineries. We don't really have any large refineries in Canada because we know that it's directly linked to cancer. In the same way, there's mounting evidence now that plastic ingestion, plastic accumulation, it's not just choking seabirds and creating problems for ocean ecosystems, it's creating problems for human health as well. But because of those magical properties, that it has different levels of firmness, it's durable, it's hydrophobic, it can be made into different kinds of materials. It's super hard to find substitutes for plastic. And certainly plastic is a lot cheaper than those substitutes. I was doing a project a few years ago with the United Nations. They were trying to get sub-Saharan Africans to South Africans to stop using plastic bags. And they were trying to introduce cloth bags. Cloth bags are way more expensive to produce. They're more energy intensive. And then the consumers, of course, say, well, they're heavier. I have to walk so far with all my goods, and they're not as, fungible in terms of their shape and their size. And then also, I have to wash them after I'm done. So we're in this whole plastics mentality of just consuming stuff and then just getting rid of it. And so what we talked about today, a lot about today, is how do we introduce new kinds of systems where you can reuse material, even if they're plastics, right? So if you think about detergent bottles, right, or soap bottles, those hard plastics, those things can be reused and refilled. Right now, we don't have a lot of businesses doing that. The durability of plastics could actually be a benefit as long as we reuse these things. I just have some props here to show you another problem with plastics, which is we think about plastics as one material, but actually it's multiple types of material. It's in everything. It's PVC, right? It's a pipe. In our food wrapping, it's LDPE. This is the hardest part. The plastic packaging is the hardest part to recycle. And then we also have this in terms of insulation. So we just use it in every sector of our economy. And that's what makes it so difficult to get rid of plastics. It has multiple uses, it has a really long lifetime, and it's super cheap. And another big problem, dry fit shirts. So you can see I'm already implicating myself in this talk here. Dry fit shirts have microplastics in them. And so when you wash them in your washer, those microplastics will start to hive off, and then they'll go into our water supply. So these are super convenient and are great on a hot day in Vancouver, but not so good for the environment. So that is one of the biggest challenges with plastics. How do we find a substitute for these? How do we find recycling processes? And even if you think about the PET bottles here, so not all of these are collected, right? There is a deposit on these. Most plastics don't have a deposit, so there's no real incentive. But then look here, we have this label, and then we have polypropylene on the top, and then this is PET. So it has to be clean, the label has to be removed, and then you have to take off the cap. The cap itself is a different kind of plastic. So another problem we have is that we mix all of our plastics together, right? Plastics are actually a class of materials, different kinds of polymers, and we don't have a system for telling manufacturers to produce this one type of plastic. If we produced one type of plastic, it would be way easier to recycle. But once you mix the plastics, it makes it infinitely harder, not only to clean and sort, but to make sure that each type of plastic might have a different type of recycling process. So it's really complicated, and that's why there needs to be much more active policy. That's what we talked about today. Policy that should go to the manufacturers and say, produce all your plastic, one monomer, one type of plastic. Another thing that Sue and I have talked about and done research on, biodegradable plastic. So biodegradable plastic, it's not really biodegradable. It requires additional techniques and technology. So when you see there's a lot of misinformation in consumer labeling, we don't really have proper labels to tell you how many times this plastic's been used. And that shows you that we don't have a real metrics or information system around our plastics. So this bottle can be reused multiple times. You don't have to just recycle it, right? I can use this for 3 or 4 months before it'll break down, whereas it can only be recycled a few times. I don't remember what the exact number is, but it's less than 10 certainly. But the problem is for a recycler, they don't know how many times this bottle's already been recycled. And so the material consistency and the ability to recycle this declines over time. So unless you have a tracking system, how do you know what materials have been recycled? If they've been recycled, how capable are you of doing them? Unless you have a tracking system that says you have to use all bottles with the same type of plastic, it just makes it extremely hard to recycle these things. So those are some of the issues that we're facing in plastics. And one of the things that we talked about today was the idea that extended producer responsibility, that's a system that we work under now, where industries are supposed to be responsible for collecting these materials. So when you go to your depot, the alcoholic beverage industry is responsible for taking that material back. But the problem is that we know that they say they're recycling it, but we don't really have full transparency. So if they export a certain amount to India, they export a certain amount to the US, is it really being recycled? We can't really trace that. That's one problem. The other problem is that it's extremely difficult to hold these PROs responsible for thinking about changing their product design, the kinds of things that I was just talking about in terms of making the materials or the products they create more easily reusable or recyclable. They don't really have an incentive to do that. In fact, what they're trying to tell you as consumers is, you guys can just go consume away and don't worry, because you'll see your Coke ad that says, oh, your bottle's 100% recycled. Well, we know that's not the case, and that's certainly not the case for all plastics. Most PET bottles are being recycled, but it's only covering a small spectrum of all the plastics that are out there. So we really need to inform the public and let them know that most plastics are not being recycled. They're ending up in landfill. They're going to affect our ecosystem, affect our health in the long run. And so we have to have more active policy to put pressure on the manufacturers to start creating more reusable materials, rethinking their product design so that we're not stuck in this one-way consumption. So just as examples, most plastics are not returned, although aluminum cans, glass bottles, and PET bottles, about 80% are returned. But if you compare other types of drinks, for example, drink boxes or drinks in a bag or cartons, or drink pouches, less than 30% are being recycled in BC. And then the hardest part is the LDPE, the plastic packaging that I was telling you about. You know how you have these containers in the supermarket where you can fill up your cereal? We should be able to do that with all kinds of materials, right? I don't know why we have to throw everything away all the time. But flexible packaging, the food wrapping, the saran wrap, that is the most challenging of all. In some cases, you can substitute cardboard or paper. You can certainly do that with food packaging, bento boxes, but wood is also more expensive, and it doesn't always have the same property, right? Paper and cardboard don't have the same hydrophobic or flexible property as flexible plastic. So in 2024, the Canada Plastics Pact, which is the main industry group, their report found that plastic packaging recycling rates were 16%. So only recycling 16% of packaging in 2022. Only 4% of all plastic packaging is generated with deposit return under EPR policies. And the US in 2023 took 178 million kilograms of plastic waste from Canada. So what happens to it after it goes to the US? Well, it's counted as recycled, but we really don't know. 20% of our packaging waste is going elsewhere, probably primarily India. Important backstory that you should know is the whole reason why we're talking about plastics is up to 2018, most of this plastic was going to Indonesia or the Philippines, to China. You've probably seen these workshops in China where they take apart the electronics. They were just taking all of our plastic waste. So in 2018, they said no more. And so now we have this problem. I don't know if you have a chance sometime to go to the Vancouver landfill, they'll tell you that it's almost at capacity. So far we've been able to put it out of sight, out of mind. But that landfill is not only causing environmental and health hazards, it's also getting full. So we're going to have to find another landfill site at some point if we just keep producing the same amount of waste because it's almost at capacity. So there are solutions, there are policy solutions, and we can talk about them tonight. I've already talked about some of them, which is to create secondary waste markets. When I was in Nepal, they were taking any kind of plastic you can have. It doesn't have to be cleaned, it doesn't have to be sorted. They put it into a heat mold, and they were creating roof tiles and floor tiles from that. There are a lot of complications with that, but there are possibilities of taking waste plastic, right? It's not just about changing the plastic that we're creating now, but we're talking about 100 years of plastic waste that is built up in the environment. And what do we do about that? So upcycling is the catchword for trying to use plastic waste and produce new materials about it. From it, or downcycling, like putting it in tires or putting it into roads. Those are things that really require active policies. They're not going to just arise on their own. You have to charge someone if they use a disposable cup, or in SFU, they charge you if you use a disposable container when you go to the cafeteria, or you can just check out a reusable container or a reusable cutlery, and then you just return it. And so there are ways to incentivize reuse markets. But the fact is that, virgin plastic is just cheaper now. So that's why we just keep increasing our use of it until we have a tax. So the people that are producing the plastic are not actually paying the full cost of what it requires for what we call the life cycle of that plastic. So all the costs that will come from handling that plastic waste and all the health hazards, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same problem that we have in climate change. People that produce it don't carry the cost. All of us carry the cost of those emissions. So that's just my brief introduction to plastic. And I want to introduce now our first speaker. So our first speaker is Dr. Misuzu Asari. Pull up.
Thanks.
He is the Deputy Director of the Research Institute for Humanity and Nature in Kyoto. And he's been working for 25 years on waste management. So I asked her to come and share with us some of the lessons from her experience dealing with waste. And it's better if you stand here, then you can just tell me to move. But they, I think they'll be able to hear you, but the camera is focused here. So. Okay.
So maybe if you can stand somewhere.
You can see
A
little bit.
Come
forward, so you can see your image in the.
If you look in the top, you can see where you are.
Yeah, just in the middle of the table, I think.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, right here.
That's too far back.
Yeah.
You can see in the.
And then.
Okay, but thank you. So, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to this place. So I want to introduce some trial in Japan, especially in Kyoto, in my project. Again, my name is Misuzu Asari. So some of you, the Japanese name is a bit difficult to pronounce it. So you know, Toyota, Nissan, Honda, Isuzu. You know? So my name is Misuzu. So it's easier to remember. And also my email address is Mezase 530. It's very difficult for you, but in Japanese, this is Mezase. Mezase is target. And 530 in Japanese, gomi zero. Gomi means waste. So my email address is, my target is zero waste.
Nice.
So please go ahead. Yeah, so as he mentioned, my research, main research topics is waste. So in my laboratory, in my research team, I'm sorry, it's almost in Japanese. Our team started from 1980. We started the detailed analysis on household waste, so-called the detailed analysis. I will show you that photo later. And when I was undergraduate, I met my supervisor and I started the waste management survey. Of course, the plastics and also food waste. And in Japan, we have so many disasters like earthquake or tsunami. So disaster waste is also a very big issue. Yes, please. And when I was a student, I have several accidents. I'm a skier, so I'm very keen in this Olympic game, etc. But I have very big accident, and I cannot do skiing. So I'll be back to the campus, and I realized that my university, Kyoto University, is a very big burden in the sense of environment. So I want to make my campus as an eco campus or sustainable campus. And I make so-called Kyoto University garbage club. And I started some the trial to the professors. So please save energy or please separate waste. So that is my starting point for my kind of life work about environmental education, communication, or management issues. And these days in Japan, we have very strict curricula for elementary school or junior high school. The mixed Ministry of Education have very hard kind of guideline for them. But so from 2020, in the guideline, there are so many concepts related to sustainability or SDG. But teachers don't know about the SDG. So we are engaged in educational development, curricular development, and such kind of topics as well. Next, please. And now, under COVID, we cannot go abroad or we cannot walk around the Japan or the world. But we face to the local sustainability in Japan. So I'm living in Kyoto City. But Kyoto City have the countryside, and we met one place, the north part of Kyoto City, and that place has very long history with the capital city Kyoto, but the population is decreasing. And now in Japan, every year, more than 300 schools become abandoned, become closed every year. So this building looks very beautiful, but this become abandoned school. So we decided to utilize this place as a SDG, a kind of educational center. We called SDG Labo, and we trying to many educational programs. I will talk later. But so anyway, now one of my topics is local sustainability. And I and my husband moved to the local area 2 years ago. So I'm now doing kind of action research in the local area as well. Next, please. Okay, so today, next video. Yeah, so today I want to introduce some the plastic issues in context of household waste research, my main research topics. And also we are trying to rethink about the plastics. So already Andy Sensei mentioned about many aspects, many issues related to plastics, but it's very important to communicate with many generations. So I will show you some examples today. Okay, so the next please. Yeah, so at first I want to introduce my main survey, our main survey. So my supervisor, Professor Takatsuki, I will introduce him later, but Professor Takatsuki is very the famous the researcher in this field, waste management field. And he started the detailed analysis on the household waste with Kyoto City in 1980. So this survey have a long history, more than 35 years history, 45 years history. Yes, and then I was engaged from my undergraduate student, and we collect, but it's very simple. So we collect waste. So in Japan, it's very normal way to dispose of waste. We have to buy this plastic bag and we dispose the household waste. Sometimes separate the plastic and the combustible waste, etc., and put in the local points. So almost 30 or 40 households, we have one spot for the deposit site of this kind of plastics, this kind of the household waste. But so in our survey, it takes 1 month a year, and we collect almost 500 household waste like this. And we start separation. This is the photo at the first stage. So at first we separate into 10 or 12 the categories. But finally, we categorize into approximately 400 categories. Yeah, so not only paper, but what kind of paper, for what purposes, or plastics for what reason, what shape, etc. So finally, we divided into 400, and we analyzed from several view aspects. And we have data for more than 45 years. Yeah. So and then we outcomes have been used to develop local and national and sometimes international policies. Yeah. And also, this is very interesting, the figure. So this shows the 100 years trends of household waste generation in Kyoto City, and maybe same the trends in many cities in Japan. Yeah, you can maybe understand what's happened here. World War II, yes, almost zero. And after World War II, the waste generation is the same, but around 1960 to 1970, we have very big increase. Of course, population is increased, but the per person, the generation per capita is also increasing. So this is very big increase, and also Japanese people face to the big pollution issues, air pollution, water pollution, and also waste pollution. Yeah, and there's small peak, but after that we have some the gaps. So this is the oil shock, dollar shock. Yeah, so the waste generation is quite big, affected by that kind of economical situation. Yeah, but after that we have the slowly increased, and the peak is millennium year. So this is not only Kyoto City, but the average amount of total domestic waste in Japan. The peak is the millennium year. But it's our honor. But Kyoto City decided to reduce the waste from the peak to the half. Yeah, and then and Professor Takatsuki, my supervisor, started the waste segregation survey 1980 because if this increase continue, we cannot manage all of the waste. So he started this kind of survey to know not how to incinerate, but how to reduce the waste. Then we can analyze from points. And the city mayor and many academia push the target, and we decided the half reduction, and we can, it's very big honor, but we can achieve the half reduction 3 or 4 years ago. So this is a very big history for us. Okay, next please.
Can you explain why it reduced so much? What is the explanation?
Yeah, there are several reasons. That it's not happy, but the first one is, as I mentioned, people have to buy the plastic bag for
I see.
dispose the waste. So that start. Yeah. So then Kyoto citizen, mottai in Japanese, mottai is no waste, and old means saying. And Kyoto citizens have a long history, and they have such kind of culture. Maybe Isan explain more. So small cost for the bag, but the Kyoto citizens want to reduce the waste, to buy the bag, please.
Yeah, and just curious, I'm assuming that between, like in that 40-year span from peak to half, the population of Kyoto would have increased substantially.
Yeah.
So the actual like waste per person would be significantly less than
Yes.
half. It would
Yeah.
be perhaps even 70%
Yeah.
less per person.
That's right.
I mean, that would be a great graph too.
Yeah, and well, the waste generation per capita is the lowest in big cities.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. And maybe we have still a kind of sense of value that much waste is not good life. Yeah, so how to manage the waste or material is by sense of value. I trust. And many cities do such kind of the charging system for waste bag, but almost all cities achieve 20% reduction. So that half reduction is very big achievement. So sorry, it's so much time, but so we are the waste management expert. So from our viewpoint, plastics has very bad guy, because first it's bulky, and also so this is one of our results. So this is based on the volume, not the weight. Yeah, so from the volume, the packaging is almost half, and most of the packaging used to be plastics. So plastics is very bulky, and in Japanese system, total waste management cost, half of the total management cost of waste management is the transportation. So bulky is very bad for transportation. So bulky is the one point. And also some plastic, the waste, like packaging, is increasing. So this is from 1980. You can see the growth of the amount. So it's issues from the viewpoint of waste management, and also sometimes harmful, and the problem. So for us, of course, other the hazardous waste or organic waste is an issue, but also the plastic is a long time for us, very challenging. Next, please. Yeah, and maybe this is very famous one, not new, but this is world material, the flow of plastic packaging, and this is the maybe starting point for global discussion. So many plastic products are used, and many the small amount is recycled, and maybe most important thing is the leakage is very big. Yeah, so that this is the world situation. But in Japan, material recycling is 25%, 10% higher. But in Japan, the incineration, so the globally incineration is 14%, but in Japan, incineration is 60%. So we have the very incineration nation. So we have, most of the municipalities, like cities and villages, have their own incineration plant. And we have 2,000 incineration plants for municipal solid waste in Japan, highest number in the world. So even for plastics, we incinerate so much. So it's very big discussion. Many installation, the people is saying that installation with energy recovery is recycling. But maybe one discussion is installation with, even with energy recovery is not recycling. So this is very discussion. Is yeah. And already Andy Sensei mentioned that we have many aspects to think about the plastic issues. So this is one example. So this is the life cycle of plastics. So the raw material mostly from the oil and naphtha, and making many kind of products. And after most of them single-use plastics, and when of use, some can be recycled, but very few at this moment, and then go into the final disposal or incineration. And each steps, each stage, each life cycles, they have the issues. Yeah, the first is they're using the fossil resources, and also during the products, some will go out to the environment, and some become the microplastics. And to talking about the recycling, we even have the several issues. So it's a very complicated issues. So it's very difficult to solve all kind of problems. Yes. Yeah. So this is one how complicated we can understand from this survey. So this is a questionnaire survey to Japanese normal people. How do a consumer perspective think about the most important issues on the plastic? So we show several the choices, but for example, the main raw material is petroleum, and manufacturing process is not ecological, or some is microplastic issue, but almost half of the people select the answer that leaking into the nature and having a negative impact on marine and other animal ecosystem. They select this. So maybe the Andy Sensei or others they have different maybe choices. Yeah, I don't select this answer, but so there are many big gap between the people. So it's very important how to move the people. So yeah, so this is very interesting but important. These are one next week. Yeah, so I realized that there are so big gap. So we started that dialogue with especially younger generation, and with I used to be in Kyoto University, and I take care of the university the club for a long time, and we rethink about the plastic with younger generation. So I think 2080, Canada hosts the G7 summit.
Yes.
Yeah, and especially discussing on the plastics.
Yeah.
So after that, but at that time in Canada, the Japanese government cannot say anything, I guess. Yeah. So after that, we are rushing to discuss about how to tackle with plastic issues. And 2019. We host the G20 summit. So we learn from during the discussion from Canada, Osaka, and before that, we make a kind of pledge from Kyoto University students. So I will show you several activities related to that. But anyway, we call this the Kyodai Pride Declaration, thinking and acting on plastics. So next please. Yeah, so yeah, students have many hobbies, and one student like dance. So she started to make a new dance to explore the Maiboro. So many people is dancing with this thing and upload on the YouTube, and that some newspapers or some TV is focusing on our activities. So I don't know how impacted it is, but the many younger generation enjoy and making this kind of network wider. And also another thing is the new kind of activity which we can do in many places. So this is the plastic in my bag. So I have never seen that kind of bag. So many things is wrong, but normal student, everyone have the bag and open and count how many plastics next free. Yeah, so next free, they open their bags and count, and we can realize how different each have the different plastics. Yeah, next please. And for example, for the university students, each box includes more than 80 plastic the products. Next please. Yeah, and after this work, we are doing this kind of work as well. So this is we call the plastic identification chart. So this have the two axes. So this direction is necessary or unnecessary, and this Y chart is avoidable or unavoidable. So if unnecessary and avoidable, maybe it's better to reduce the first. But if unavoidable and necessary, so this is essential use. So we have to use longer, or we have to make the closed loop for the materials. But it's sometimes depending on each maybe sense of value or lifestyle, and we can compare from the back. So this kind of activity can realize how plastics is in our life, and also how important to manage well experience. Yeah. And based on this concept, we are doing the bigger survey. We have the long history about waste survey. So we can categorize all plastic products into 50 product category, and we ask big consumers the groups. So how you necessary, so essential or not essential. So I will focus the answer. So late is I know of the plastic alternatives like wood or paper, but I need these products made of plastics. And so you can check the lead part. So lead part is 10 to 20%. So not all of them. So maybe we can change the world. So based on this, I push the manufacturers or polymakers. Next week. Yeah. And also, some of them select. Sorry, back to that. Right. So and then some of them select this product itself is unnecessary. So many people select this as well. So next please. Yeah. So I feel that it's very from starting from plastics. Maybe we can think about the lifestyle. And here I have to introduce my supervisor. So you have the postcard. You each have the postcard. And I mentioned that my professor, my supervisor is Professor Takatsuki. Takatsuki is in Japanese, but in English, his name is Taka means high, Tsuki means moon, and his pen name is Simon. So he is a very famous professor, but at the same time, he is very famous, I don't know, a cartoonist, mangaka, and he wrote so many ecological manga. So please bring the Professor Haimun's manga in your home. Yeah. Yeah, and also this is very interesting one. So everyone know it's a little bit difficult to understand. But for example, everyone know that bring my bag or bring my bottle is very important. But once something happened, yeah, we sometimes lost or forget to bring them and buy the bag or the disposable cup, or same as transportation, etc. So it's very difficult to change the behavior. better to, even if we can change the knowledge or consciousness, but behavior, there is a very big gap. So how to change the behavior is our very big issue in this space. Yeah, and so please bring this manga. Yeah, so this is very important. So from the top, so many energy or resources is coming into the society, and we are very hard to try to recycle. But one people is saying that they have to simply turn off the taps. But today we have the expert meeting today, but it's very difficult to turn off the taps because there are so many persons, economic persons, or some supermarket or so many attractive industries there and watching. Yeah. Okay, next please. Yeah, but we have to start from several points. Maybe here you can understand many options. So I will skip this. And I want to introduce another activity. So this photo is very interesting. This is a photo in Tokyo area in 1970. So you can see the Shinagawa Beach near to Tokyo, and also the river in Tokyo. I don't know the situation in Vancouver, but in that ages, there's so many the plastics product is produced starting. So many plastic is disposed and covered the river. So this is the same situation now in Asian or African countries. Yeah, but we Japanese people or your country developed the municipal solid waste management system, and also many people get some the kind of custom to clean up our towns. And you have another brochure. So this is our last year. We have the expo in Osaka, and that time we tried to spread the kind of activities for zero waste. So my husband developed the kind of application to doing the cleanup with smartphone. So if you are interested, please check our website. So you can get the English the application or guideline. So using smartphone, you can check where we can find the waste or where and how long we the work to the town during the cleanup. And also you can connect to many people who love to clean up the town. Next, please.
Just 5 minutes.
Yeah. So then, based on that kind of dialogues, we developed other the new researches or new activities. So please, right? Yeah. But at first, I want to share the situation about the Japanese customers. So this is another person's survey, but this is asking several SDG or environmental related activities in Tokyo, New York, and Paris for the normal customers. So the first one is I use reusable bags, so my bag when shopping. So number one in Japan is number one because now from 2020 the all shopping bag become the charged. So maybe economic the policy have a big power. But the next is avoiding food waste or reusable bottle, energy saving home appliances, etc., etc. So you can see the Japanese customers the behavior, the ratio of the behavior is very, very low for most of the answers. And the final one, I do not engage in any of the above mentioned behavior is 24%. So I don't know how the Andy-san or Tati-san feel about the Japanese customers, but the total maybe consciousness is not so high, especially for example, animal related issues, etc. So maybe Japanese people don't. I will explain my that kind of some hypothesis later. Next, please. Yeah. So one of my hypothesis is the Japanese people don't have so much sense of value on social issues or environmental issues. So this is our survey. So how many times you chat with your friends or family about the environmental issues? So that point. So you can see Japan, Paris, New York, and Jakarta, and the right hand side is Japan is the maybe more than 70%. So that is the at least once a month they don't talk about the environmental issues with friends and the families. But for example, Jakarta, Indonesia, they talk. So they answer that almost 25% people chat with that kind of the topics at least once a day. So very big differences. So there are many reasons, but the one is speaking with others about social issues, including environment, is a bit hesitated for Japanese people. Also, of course, Japan is very beautiful. So, but Jakarta, they have the air pollution now. So maybe that is another reason. Yeah, but I think how to increase the chat with others is one of the important points, I guess. Next, please. So our team is, of course, the emphasis on the research, but at the same time, we are pushing many kind of dialogues with many stakeholders. So this February, we hold one symposium in Kyoto for 2 days, and we got more than 1,000 people from all over the village. And Andy-san also attended this session on plastic issue here. Thank you very much. And, you can see the movie on this dialogue if you are interested. Next, please. Yeah. And also, I mentioned about the abundance school we used. And in that school, we developed the plastic school using several classes. Andy Sensei already experienced it, but for example, music class, the plastic ghost is waiting the kids or the visitors, and the plastic ghost is thinking about their voice, something like that. So this is original program, educational program on plastics, but usually plastic become the kind of bad aspects, the challenges. But at the same time, we have to think about the importance of plastics, how to manage well the plastic is also very important point. And the part of the plastic school, we developed one board game, so-called plastic feeling game. So that this is version 1. So this is the target, the pet bottle. So once they the birth as a pet bottle, sometimes, so in Japan we have so many vending machines in the city. So some is the sold in a vending machine and some in the supermarket. And unfortunately, when they the sale in the vending machine, sometimes more than supermarket, sometimes dispose in a city and sometimes going to the sea or something like that, and they can understand the cascade recycling, etc. Yeah, and there are many the kind of events or quiz in this board game. So we emphasize the dialogue between the players. Yeah, then this is a part of our survey, our research. So after this, the game, we are doing the survey. How do you feel and how do you think about the behavior, etc. And we have more than 3,000 players, the answers, and we can exactly we can know that the dialogue is very important, and also how to think about the plastic is quite changed. So I want to follow the results in the future. So,
We're almost out of time. Trying to wrap it up.
you made it the last time. Yeah, sorry. But this is so not only from our programs, but it is very good news. So this is the questionnaire by the newspaper, Asahi newspaper, and they are asking, do you want to do SDG related consumption? And teenager is highest in compared to other generations. So I think the next generation is very important, and I want to push new generation stuff. Maybe we can skip. So yeah, this is just an example with the kids program. Yes, yeah, and the final one is my supervisor. Yeah, so very important to develop a sustainable society with good technique and also our change of our sense of value. Okay, thank you very much.
Sue Maxwell, our next speaker from Zero Waste BC.
Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Sue Maxwell. I'm the chair of Zero Waste BC, although we can have some of our board members here as well today, and we had some earlier attending the panel. Zero Waste BC, our mission really is shown here, or the vision, I should say, is a just world of vibrant, resilient, regenerative, zero waste communities in harmony with nature. And the panel that we had earlier today was really talking about how do we move beyond our current extended producer responsibility system to embrace more of a circular economy or zero waste system. Next slide, please. So I'll just start a little bit about what zero waste is. Zero waste has an international definition, internationally recognized definition of the conservation of all resources by means of responsible production, consumption, reuse, and recovery of products, packaging, and materials without burning them, and with no discharges to land, water, or air that would threaten environmental or human health. So that's kind of the definition. Sometimes industry will try to redefine it to meet their needs, but that is why it's so important to have a clear, consistent, peer recognized definition. We also have the hierarchy here, and what's important here is that the rethink and redesign, reduce and reuse are separate parts of the triangle here, because that's the part where you haven't made any waste yet. It's still a useful product. And so you really want to do things at that level of the hierarchy. And when you do things at the top of the hierarchy, you generally generate more jobs and you're addressing climate change and you're having lower impact. Once you decide, and whether it's you or a business or an organization, that the item is no longer useful, then you're looking at recycling or composting it, material recovery, or residuals management. Things that would be considered unacceptable in zero waste would be incineration or waste to energy. And the reason for that, I'll get into a little bit more later on. There's a part on the side here that you won't be able to read, and that's okay, you're not meant to. It's just more to show you that if you go and take a look at the hierarchy, there's this more detailed version, so that if you were doing zero waste planning and you wanted to think, oh, is this solution better than that solution? There's more details. There's some guiding principles like the precautionary principle and definitions. Next slide, please. And so in 2021, a group of us did some work on taking a look at what zero waste would look like for BC. Let me know if I'm right in the middle of the slides for you. And so if you just take a look in the middle part, this is diversion. So diversion would normally count as recycling and composting. And if you look in the middle, 2010, we were diverting about 44%. we're a little bit different than other jurisdictions in that this includes concrete and asphalt, and many places do not include construction and demolition materials. But in those 8 years, we went up to 59% diversion. A lot of communities in Metro Vancouver and elsewhere rolled out composting programs and green bins, and there was an increase in the number of products that could be recycled. And so if you just looked in the middle, you think, hey, wow, this is amazing. Like, we're the leading jurisdiction. We went up from 44 to 59% in only 8 years. But if you look to the right where it shows disposal, you'll see that we were still throwing out about the same amount of material. And that's because the total generation, so the materials we threw out, plus the recycling, plus the organics, grew by 37%. And that's just in 8 years. And so you will say, well, maybe we had more people move here, and we did, but that's still 23% per capita. And that is also, I've heard a presentation where people talking about how much we store. We can't even put our cars in our garages, we need bigger closets. And so that doesn't include all the extra stuff we have in our houses as well. So not doing well. Next slide, please. I just want to also show, sometimes we want to know what's in the waste. So our focus today was really plastic. So it's this big blue chunk. And this is data from Metro Vancouver, and this is 2024. But this is fairly representative of most communities. It'll be, give or take 5 or 10%, or not even 10, 5% probably for most of these categories, similar. I mean, we have green bins, but we still have a huge amount of compostable organics that is going into waste. Plastic is a big percent, paper still, surprisingly. And there will also be plastics in some of these other things like electronic waste and building materials. Next. Oh, that's right. And then the other part, and this is what I want to emphasize, this little graph over on the side. It's a bit harder to see in the room, but essentially we often focus on the residential sector because that's what we see, that's the part we have control over in our homes, and where it goes. IC&I stands for institutional, commercial, and industrial. So that's your schools and hospitals and businesses. That's also a big percentage. And then this C&D is construction and demolition. And we don't see that very often because how often are we building a house? Very, very rarely, maybe never. And so we don't see it, but it's still a big part of our waste. Next slide, please.
Sorry, the non-compostable organics, what's
Oh, that's a good question. Somebody asked me that earlier today. So non-compostable organics would be things like leather or rubber. I mean, during a very long time, they will break down, but they're not going, you can't just put them in your green bin and in 3 weeks it'll disappear. So those are the kinds of materials. And also, compared to other countries, you might see some of these sectors become bigger because these are just percentages of what's there. Ideally, what's there is getting a lot smaller. And so if we took all the organics out, all those other high percentages might go up. If we didn't do something about those two.
Thank you.
This is what we use plastics for. And so this is kind of a European study. So packaging at the bottom, you can see is the biggest component. And that's why there has been a lot of focus on packaging. And sadly, packaging is also generally single use. So we use it for a very short period of time. Building and construction, also a lot. All those pipes, sometimes wraps, sometimes insulation. Textiles, consumer products, and then transportation and electronics. So those are also why if we want to tackle plastics, we need to think, okay, what is it being put into? Next slide, please. So our recommendations, and this was in 2021, was to move upstream from recycling. Recycling alone is not going to solve this issue. We need to improve and expand extended producer responsibility. So extended producer responsibility, we have a recycling regulation here in BC, and that's why we have programs for tires and oil and electronics, small appliances and light bulbs, as well as curbside packaging, although businesses are not regulated. So, sometimes we hear about where are plastics going and what's happening. Very different system that Recycle BC manages for your blue boxes in your homes versus what might happen in a business which is not regulated. But we recommended improving and expanding those things. You might have heard some controversy because the province recently walked back from its commitment to add mattresses to the EPR program, and that would have, a lot of local governments really want that. Hopefully that'll come in the future, but to expand different categories, but also improve it because many littler communities, First Nations communities in BC don't have access to the same degree of collection or depot options as you might have here in the Lower Mainland. Needed to address organics. We want to use buildings longer and deconstruct them, not just demolish them, and to reduce and streamline the kind of plastic. all the benefits from zero waste, you would get more jobs, and climate change, will be addressed. So climate change, I mean, a lot of people think, oh no, we're driving trucks to the landfill. Hands up who thinks that's the biggest problem with waste. Okay, that is not, you're correct. The driving is not your biggest problem. What happens with the waste is the problem. When you put organics in the landfill, when there's no oxygen, it gets covered over every day. That's anaerobic. And what happens then is all of the organics that's in there will form methane. Methane is a much worse and more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, which is why if you want to do something for the environment, A, eat all the food that you buy, don't waste it, and B, don't throw any of it in the garbage. Also with an incinerator, you will produce a lot of greenhouse gases. The transportation part is a small part. It's a part, but it's nothing compared to what you're doing with it at the end. And then the other thing to think about is the ecosystem impacts. Well, actually, go back to those greenhouse gases. So we talk about disposal, but the much bigger component is what it took to make those things in the first place. If I take a single-use cup and I use it for, finish a drink in 2 minutes and throw it away, it's not just what I'm throwing away, it's all of that work that it took to get the fiber from it, sometimes a plastic lining, all of that took energy. And there's ecosystem impacts as well. So like clear cuts, many people, my generation, there was a lot of protests around forestry, clearing on certain areas. But that's what we do to get fiber. This is a photo up in northeastern BC. This is what gas and oil exploration looks like. And then you start to think, oh yeah, that's why the caribou had problems. This is a mine. And so you think about Mount Poly Dam and acid leaching and acid drainage and things like that. So yes, there will be impacts of how we get our materials. So then let's respect it and use our materials as long as possible. Next slide, please. I like this campaign from World Wildlife Fund and it's a bit grainy here, but this is actually a gorilla photo in the coffee grounds. And it's talking about the hidden costs. And there's a rhino in this one and a macaque in this other one. So that's where we should start to think about. Our products that we have little backpacks with all the greenhouse gases, with all the other impacts. And let's be respectful of that. Next slide, please. We also did a study because Metro Vancouver, as some of you might know, has been renewing its solid waste management plan. And so we took a look at the how they were managing their waste. And so what we found is that the incinerator was the actual worst way to manage it. It was the most expensive. It produced the most greenhouse gases per ton of waste thrown away. But also when you compare it to other sources of energy, it had the most greenhouse gases and pollution per unit of energy. It'd be better to use natural gas to get energy than it would to use to burn the materials. Also, there would be less pollution. It would be improving air quality, and that would also decrease the public and environmental health risks. And because it costs so much money and there is so much staff time devoted to it, then you could take those resources and focus them on actual waste reduction, which would have a much longer impact and better impact. I know that Andy mentioned that, like the landfill is filling in Vancouver, and it is. They just recently got, the past month, I think, an extension to 2050. So there is more time, but it's really important that we don't fritter that time away, because that's often what happens. Nobody does anything till it's like, oh, we got 1 year left of space, or we got to do something, but let's do something now. We have more time. If you half the amount of waste, you've doubled the lifespan of your landfill. When with an incinerator, you have to burn it at full speed. You can't just run it at half speed. So that's another benefit as well of getting rid of it. So next slide, please. So we had some really good speakers today. We had somebody from the History Environment, Claire, Ruth from Zero Waste USA, Nicholas from Quebec, and Baptiste from Citeo, which is packaging product stewardship responsibility organization in France. And we were taking a look at what do we need to do here? Next slide, please. So since we put out that zero waste agenda report, the province has been doing a lot of things. I'm not saying it's because of that report, but I just want to say that we have moved on from 2021. The province has banned single-use plastic items, and some of you have seen this fun little blue otter because they put out a lot of communications tools for restaurants and businesses to help with this. That include this mascot. Municipalities have been empowered to make bylaws, so they can certainly make bylaws already on the single-use plastics, like bags and things like that. But then Tofino got a special permission to be able to ban small water bottles in like single-use water bottles. And Victoria got permission to require dine-in reusables if you're going to be dining in somewhere. They've also created some toolkit information. They've been funding cleanup, especially over the pandemic. There was a lot of shoreline cleanups that have happened, and have been then partnering and supporting communities and nonprofits and other service providers. Slide, please. So extended producer responsibility, BC has been expanding them. And so some of you might have those little propane canisters you take camping. If people are using sharps or having to give your cat diabetes injections or things like that. More of the chemicals that are used for automotive, like antifreeze and oil, were already covered, but then there's others. And more types of batteries, including when they're in products like cards or shoes or things, are going to get regulated. So those consultations will start to happen this year. There has been a focus on reuse, what we definitely need. There is a focus on reuse, but we really need targets and research and funding, pilots and working with industry. And you might not be able to see so much of these details here, but this was from a presentation earlier where, taking a look in Europe, they've actually set much more aggressive targets, and not just targets for how much of the material you'll collect, which is kind of what we have here in BC, but also targets for how much need to be reused and reduced. And what they're having, and here, like a lot of the support's been from the government, whereas there, they are actually having the people who are putting all those products in the market pay for that. We also need high collection and recycling targets still too. Producers funding the oversight organizations, we need to make sure it's not a barrier to the province to be like, oh, if we add mattresses to the regulation, now we need more staff. It's like, have it be funded as part of the producer responsibility. Making sure we have access to collection, particularly for smaller communities. Funding for research and litter pickup, that's something that they have in France. So a lot of, April's pitch-in day, a lot of people might participate in those cleanups. They're actually funding some of that through the producer responsibility programs. And then it doesn't make sense if you have a toaster that only lasts a year, made of plastic, glued together, can never fix it, versus a toaster that's like made of metal, a bit more expensive, lasts 20 years, unscrew it and replace the parts. Should they pay the same fee? And so eco-modulated fees are starting to take a look at what is the impact of the different products and should they pay different amounts. Having reduction targets in California, they're looking at both, you can make things lighter is one way of doing it, but you also need to have fewer number of things that you put in the market. And of course, California has practices in carpet. They're looking at textiles, and we see other places are also getting agricultural credits. And picture of these bottles on the side is the pilot that they're running in France. So because they're trying to have more and more reusables, they've got some standard size containers. You put different labels on them, but they can be then used kind of like what we have with our standard older beer bottles, but doing it for other products. Next slide, please. So circular economy, it's a sort of a similar concept to zero waste, where it's about redesign and rethinking and keeping materials in the loop, as well as acceleration. BC had committed, like the province of BC had committed to developing a circular economy strategy. They've been kind of moving it away from it a little bit as they step away from the Clean BC plan. But California is an interesting example. They've just recently put out a zero waste plan. So they are looking at it from like statewide level with a real focus on refusing to make waste and rethinking design, using and repurposing and recycling and composting and digesting remaining materials. Quebec also has a circular economy strategy, and they've had it for quite some time. So now they have some more data on how effective that's been. And they've been laying a lot of groundwork in terms of working with academia, setting up systems for it. And many of their municipalities, like say Montreal, have been also developing their own plans. So some of the things that we were looking at today or hearing today is really that need for a systemic look at things. It's one thing to say, oh, I'm going to get rid of this single-use bag, but if we just all move to paper bags, have we really moved the dial, or have we just shifted things? And is it about shifting? I mean, a lot of people are like, how do we set up our use and things? But for a lot of it, it used to be like that. Milk bottles used to come to the door. My grand never had a disposable shopping bag. She always brought her own little basket. And so there's a lot of systems that we used to have that we might need to go back to, and they're not necessarily new. It's just about how do we move systemically away from this very disposal, consumer-oriented system to something that's much more likely to be sustainable. Slide. So just wanted to say thank you very much for your attention, and I'll maybe get to some questions, but you're welcome to email me as well.
Christoph, why don't you just start talking while I'm.
Thanks, Sandy. Good to be here and see everyone. Thanks everyone for coming this evening. And as Sue and Andy and Misuzu were saying, we had a very interesting long session today where we brought together a lot of experienced voices and people to talk about policy, the regulation, get some very interesting insights and perspectives from around the world, and then also talk a little bit about different business models and ways that we can actually sort of start to practice circularity a little bit. So that's what I'll speak about a little bit today. So my name's Christoph Schultz. I'm with the Recycling Council of BC. So we're not Recycle BC. For those of you that know that organization, we often get mixed up with Recycle BC. So we are a nonprofit organization that has been around for over 15 years. So we are belong within the Recycling Council in Canada. And we are our main work, our kind of core business is actually helping the public navigate the system in British Columbia. So we have what sometimes we try not to call this, but the recycling hotline. So there's a number that you can call, basically amazing staff that we answer about 30,000 calls a year from the public in British Columbia. And also you can go to the next slide. Yeah. And basically questions about anything, whether it's things that you're looking to recycle, whether there's a program available where you live, whether it's something that maybe is hazardous materials and what the disposal options are. We work pretty closely with the Ministry of Environment and Parks. So in cases where we maybe have a question, we don't have the answer, we can ask them. We work very closely with municipal government as well. And so that's something that is the main thing that we do as an organization, is we're a one-stop shop basically for all that information for the public. As you can imagine, those calls, we're taking information on a variety of different questions. We then take that, compile it, and report back to the ministry. So we let them know when there's maybe more problematic materials, or there's things that are just getting more questions about certain materials or products. And so in that way, we look to see how we can inform policy more directly by reporting back to them. And we do the same as well with municipal and local government, letting them know just what we're getting questions about within a certain region. So we answer phone calls. We also have online search tool called Recyclopedia and an app as well. And these are things that we have a system where basically on Recyclopedia, if you go there right now, it will tell you where you can recycle things. But as an organization, and talking about, as Sue's mentioning, circular economy and trying to encourage people up the hierarchy, one thing that we're doing right now is trying to look at ways that we can encourage that more. So when people call, our staff are obviously able to kind of encourage, if someone's looking to get rid of furniture or something, we can kind of give them more options on ways that they can reuse it rather than necessarily disposing it. And so that's something that we're trying to do as an organization, just find different ways that we can develop the tools so that people know more about what options are available to them. Because we want to be the circular economy as much as possible. I just noticed I'm wearing the same shirt as this. That's my way of supporting a circular economy. The same shirt in the presentation. So Sue touched on this already. What is a circular economy? This is what we were, kind of the theme and focus what we were talking about today. And really, I like what Sue was saying. It's about respect. It's really about trying to keep materials in their highest use and highest sort of value within the system. So this is the intention of what a circular economy is that you're able to use materials and products as long as possible. And then when you aren't able to, say, use them for whatever it was, whatever the remaining resource is, still has some use in some different applications. So that's the ideal scenario of a circular economy, and then what circular businesses would be, are businesses that basically are, I would say there's more synergy between businesses. So the idea that one business is waste, and so today we're talking a lot about plastic. And I know one person said they don't like to say even plastic waste, so I like that. Just say plastic, it's just plastic that doesn't have a certain use anymore. How can that be used for a different application? So we as an organization try to, through the information that we get from what people are calling about, and we also try to connect different organizations. It's something that we try to advocate. Can you go to the next slide? And so what I feel like often we talk about a circular economy as though it is something that's aspirational, but to a certain extent, it does already exist around us, but we don't always necessarily recognize what those businesses are. So here's some examples of businesses, some that exist and some that will exist or can be can come about to help reduce the amount of waste or plastic waste in the system. So businesses that help encourage sharing. So just to reduce the volume of products in a market. So some examples of that can be like a tool library or something. There's an organization called the Thingery where they do equipment lending. So maybe you don't need, a certain type of tool. You only use it once a year or not that often, or maybe it's something you deal with, gardening tool or something. It's nice when you don't necessarily have to own that, and you can have a system where people can be sharing and renting that. So that's one example of a type of business. So reuse, there's so many applications for reuse. Again, whether it's reusing furniture, something again which still has value, or whether it's looking at a reusable cup, so you're not disposing as many single-use items. So looking at again, there's many business models and ways that businesses can be encouraging that. Refilling. How many of you go? No judgment here, but how many of you go to refill? Know a local refillery where you can. Yeah, a few of you. Okay, soaps are different things. So it's nice. There's a few of you, but it would be nice if there was more of them around. Right? They're probably not quite in as many locations as we would like them to be. But again, just another way that we could, if there was more of these businesses, we could have, less consumer packaging, which again, as Sue pointed out, is a very significant portion of plastic waste in the system. Repair, again, feels like these days it's hard to find a repair person. If you do find someone, they're quite expensive. Fortunately, it seems like there's quite a movement around repair cafes. I'm not sure if any of you have gone to one before, but feels like developing a bit more of that culture of like seeing how we can keep things working, especially as at the same time as it seems that products are being designed for sort of shorter or quicker obsolescence. And then lastly, repurpose. And again, focusing on plastic, looking at ways that you can take plastic, which maybe doesn't have use in a certain application or single use, now it doesn't have a specific purpose, and looking at other ways that you can turn that into something. So as part of the conversation today, we had we had 3 speakers come in and they were presenting different businesses that they have that are basically employing models like this. And so, go to the next slide. And so I just wanted to share what some of these businesses were, and so you can just see some examples. So this is an organization that's based in Chile. It started in Chile initially. They actually grew, to be quite large internationally. They were in the UK. They had some sort of pilot projects in the US and in other parts of Europe. But it's interesting with this one because what they found was in certain parts of Santiago where people were buying like small sachets and getting single-use items and just buying them in smaller quantities, that they called it, basically they were paying higher amounts per volume for what they were getting. So they call it the poverty tax, that they were, buying 50 grams of a certain amount because that's what they could afford and also generating more waste as a result. So this organization started initially to try to give people an opportunity to actually get more value for their money, especially given that it was in areas where there was more, people had lower incomes. And kind of seeing the co-benefit at the same time that actually they can reduce plastic waste at the same time. So it's something which maybe started with a certain intention, but then saw there is a very environmental benefit of doing that as well. So they, talking about refilleries and how many there are in Vancouver. So they had They started with, as it says here, sort of basic vending machines in sort of small convenience shops, but it grew to reach over 2,000 stores in Santiago. So a lot of people within it's a very large city, but had access to this type of product, which was giving us something which ended up costing less. And then what they would do is they had to buy the sort of refillable container, but then with that they could go and they could use, basically sort of refill them at the vending machines, and they would be able to do that at a lower cost. So it was a way of both reducing the plastic that they would be using, but also giving them a chance to buy more products that, again, just getting them the value. There's the one point here that it started, they had very low, sort of not the best results in the beginning in terms of reuse, just having 10% sort of, product return, but over time, it's something that people, the consumer behavior came around and people became very, became part of their habits. With that success at that scale, it started to attract the attention of very big product manufacturers, and that's where they looked to expand the model in other countries, and they were in different large retailers, stores like Walmart. What's sort of interesting in this case is eventually, because of economic challenges, and I think it was part of kind of connected to a few years after the pandemic and sort of some of the economic hardships that were happening at that time. And actually the company stopped operating, but it's still kind of an interesting example. And that was part of what we were looking to sort of share today with the different group, was how these businesses, ways that they can work and lessons that we can learn from just from their different operating model. Do you want to go to the next one? So the next business that we had that was speaking was, it's nice that they've got this video here, Reusable. So it's a Vancouver-based company, which maybe some of you are familiar with them. They started doing, providing reusable containers for food essentially. They said they started with sort of hundreds of restaurants in Vancouver, thinking that, okay, this is where we're gonna tackle this issue with restaurants, take out packaging and see where we can, reduce the amount of waste that's being generated. And what they shared was, at the same time, they also started a project with SFU. And what they shared was they found that actually doing or offering this model in restaurants actually was really quite complicated. They just didn't have large enough adoption rates with it. But seeing what the results in SFU sort of showed them that it's much easier to develop this reusable model, where it's kind of a closed system, where you can work with like an institution like a university. Ideally, if they make it mandatory that you have to have these kind of containers, single-use containers or not, they don't allow other types of single-use packaging. And with that, they were able to see much more success. So I think there's just a couple of the numbers, or one of the numbers up there right now. It seems like again, interesting learning from the beginning. They stopped focusing on restaurants and now are focusing just on universities. And they didn't say the number of universities they're in, I think, but you can see there are 101.2 million reuses, which again, you think of how many single-use items that's being, not being used. So quite a promising story, and interesting to contrast from the first one, where Algramo was not fully successful with their model. Reusable is doing quite well with their focus now. And then the third example we had was quite different. So obviously the first two are more focused on single-use items, things that people had every day. The third one was again from Vancouver region and looking at the issue of waste from construction industry. So Sue was pointing out, she broke down showed the pie chart for residential, what the composition of that is, and then speaking to construction demolition and the IC&I sector as well. And so from the construction sector, it's something that I think it's something we don't often think about with new buildings. You see there's a lot of materials going into the construction. We know that from demolition, obviously there's materials that are, being demolished, and that would have to go somewhere. But this organization called Lighthouse, they wanted to deal with the issue of plastic waste around construction. And so they got different funding to do this pilot project where they worked with different developments at 8 different sites in Vancouver. And had these particular bins where the developers, they would be diverting their plastics just in those bins. And you can't quite see, well, here, the image on the right, maybe it's a little confusing, but this is what they were turning it into afterwards. So they actually were taking the plastics, which were different types of plastics. So part of their project was also just to see what they were able to recover from it, there was a range of different types. And as it shows here, about just under 80% of it was recyclable. They said in the early stages of construction, some of it was too contaminated to be recyclable. So, but it is a pretty high percentage, I would say. And what they ended up turning this into is these concrete void systems, which actually then can be part of the construction sector afterwards. So there are things that can actually go into concrete slabs that still provide the structural support and actually mean that I think they said about 30% less concrete is required in slabs. So that has huge implications in terms of materials required for that, which has environmental benefits and of course benefits in terms of GHG emissions as well. So a very interesting application. It's more of a pilot project. And I know there's a lot of questions about, okay, how, I think for a lot of people, there's kind of the questions of, well, what are the packaging standards for the construction sector? What are the ways that we can try to make that more efficient, that they're not generating so much waste in the first place? But it's, this project feels like it's a bit more of a pioneering project. And I think there'll be a lot of sort of learning to come from this one, especially in a place like Vancouver where there is so much development and also demolition as well, looking at ways that we can reduce waste in that sector. So yeah, just wanted to share those 3 stories, those 3 organizations that we're presenting today, and different ways of, again, just thinking differently about plastic waste and resources that are in our environment, and thinking about how we can either eliminate them or make sure that we don't have to use them even from the start, or if they are in the system, just different ways that we can maybe turn them into products that have value. That's it. So thanks.
That was a huge wave of information, but hopefully you found it as informative as I did, and really forces you to rethink all of our consumption habits. I always thought that climate change was the biggest problem, but now we see that circular economy is even more complex and challenging than climate change for the reasons I mentioned at the outset. So we have about half an hour of open discussion. If you all have any questions or comments for any of the speakers, let us know, and they can always come in the front if people online have a question and would like to see their answer. Have you seen anything in the chat, Fasil?
As of now, no questions.
Okay. Niels?
So I have a more open question maybe about waste incineration. I know there's a huge discussion about waste incineration and so on. And I'm always hearing that it's polluting, it's environmental incorrect, and it supports more more waste. But there's so many case studies in Europe as well, where it's cleaner than fossil fuel now than to burn any waste. And if you are wise about it, and if you recycle everything and then when the rest, why isn't it? It is actually a tremendous source for both heating and cooling and also even electricity.
I think we should have Sue and Dr. Asari answer that, because it's a big aspect of Japan's waste management system. Go ahead, Sue.
So I think there's a couple different elements on it. The first is when we're saying if it's clean, there's what standards are they being held to? And then is the testing adequate? So I think some of the things we've been looking at is Toxico Watch is a nonprofit organization in Europe, the Netherlands actually. And they've been doing testing around a lot of the different incinerators in Europe, but also some other locations. And what they were finding when they were doing biomonitoring, because pollutants like dioxins are very, very toxic pollutants and they don't ever disappear. And they're very, very, like, it's very, very small amounts will cause problems. But that, because it's such a small amount, they're hard to measure. So what Toxico Watch was doing was taking a look at biomonitoring, because things would accumulate. So they were taking a look at things like backyard chicken eggs, pine needles, and some other sources. And what they were finding is that even though the incinerators may be meeting all the tests and look like they're, meeting the standards, there was still, particularly because, and we have it here in Metro Vancouver, it used to be that they wouldn't test during times of startup or shutdown or malfunction. So unfortunately, dioxins form when you put something with chlorine in there, and especially if it's not at a very high temperature. So that not being at a high temperature is often when startup or shutdown. And so what is important is not just that you can meet the test, but more, what is the total amount of pollution coming out of the facilities? And what Toxico Watch was finding is that actually there was, when they tested around the facilities, a significant amount of pollution there, to the degree that around one of the incinerators in Paris, that they recommended not eating the backyard chicken eggs. And so the health authority there went and repeated the tests and then found also that it was a problem. An incinerator in Lausanne, Switzerland, which was older, like it had been there for a long time, they found also that it had been putting out a lot of pollution. So they started doing soil testing, going out in concentric circles, and weirdly, squash and cucumbers and things like that, I think, accumulate things more. And so what they now have is recommendations about, like, well, if you grow them here, don't eat them, or grow them here, but only eat them once a week. And so we see that in Europe, they have been tightening up the regulations a bit. Now they will test during times of startup, but we don't have that here in Metro Vancouver yet. And actually, Metro Vancouver is holding a consultation on how much pollution should be allowed and how often should they test. So pay attention to that. In University of Oregon, they were testing and they were looking at moss. And what they found, again, similarly to the one incinerator that they had in Oregon, that the moss was accumulating the dioxins. And so in Oregon, they required testing continuously. Like in Metro Vancouver right now, they test, there's 3 boilers. They test 1 boiler once a year at a time when they tell people, hey, we're coming to come and test today. So it takes 3 years to get the full amount of testing. In Oregon, they said, you're going to need to test continuously. And with that, that meant that the incinerator operator decided to close it. So that's just from the pollution part, the toxic pollution part.
Can I just say something?
One more question, yeah. Sorry, I'm just going to finish the one thought. When we analyze the greenhouse gas impact, though, and this has also been replicated by Dr. Neil Tang, we did a study to show that the amount of greenhouse gases per unit of waste process is also higher. So those are some of the things that we were using for our information, but I'd like to hear.
So in Denmark, we just placed a 400 megawatt heat and power plant right in the city center of Copenhagen. So I don't recognize these studies as all. I am actually involved in kind of waste production and also power plant production in that kind of environment. So they don't ring the bell at all. The studies that you're referring to, I know the old power plant and the one that we have in Vancouver is very old, 40, 50 years old. But the new plants now, which is 5 years or even less, they are as clean as fossil fuel plants and even more. So, and we have to be able to compare apples and apples and right. So they do use the same standards for whatever they are measuring these pollution. So I don't recognize that people can't. So and again, the waste incineration plant in Copenhagen is right in the city center, and it's the cleanest in the world.
Yes, although I have seen some things that would rebut that. Any of the things that I've talked about, like the Oregon one or the Toxico Watch ones, are available through our website, and I'm happy to share those with you as well. In terms of, I think that's the debate. I know the former, I think it was the Minister of Environment for Denmark, had tried to prevent the building of new incineration capacity because they thought they were in over capacity. And I know that when we were taking a look at some of the other jurisdictions, the thing to think about is that plastic has something like 36 gigajoules per unit of energy, 36 some metric. Organics like food waste would be maybe down around 8. So plastics really have the most energy. And so that is a problem in countries that rely on incineration for energy, is that they don't really have an incentive to recycle the plastics. They want to put it in there. Only plastics are coming with a whole bunch of other things. Somebody throws in a battery, then there's lead or mercury. Somebody throws in something else, there's cadmium in with it. At least if you're burning coal, you kind of know what you have and you can gear your pollution measures to it. And that's why we don't recommend at all burning of the waste, and certainly not for plastics, because that's why it's often been the plastics industry and the fossil fuel industry that have been supporting the building of new incinerators, because it kind of gives them a pass on actually having to do something about the plastic. But
Very sensate.
Very much. So yeah, maybe Japanese people is more the lover for the incineration plant. So we have the long history about the incineration plant, and mostly so 1970, many municipalities built incineration plant because you can see the big increase of the waste amount, and also like Vancouver, that Japan have a very long rainy kind of rainy season and very humid. So how to manage the waste is very big issue. And once the one municipality starts the incineration plant, and the national government makes subsidy for almost 100% of the investment for incineration plants. So many municipalities want to build incineration plants. So almost all municipalities have. So now we have 2,000 incineration plants maintained by municipalities, but in all days more incineration plants we have. So about 1990s, and also we have many pollution issues. So when I was the child, I live in a so-called new town built in 1970, and the new town was built. Before new town's built, the one incineration plant was built for our new town. So the incineration plant is very common for us. Yeah, so we are living, so wastewater and waste, and the incineration plant is a kind of one set of the town. Yeah, but there are so many dust issues. So when I was a child, when my mother was drying our clothes outside the garden, so sometimes become a little bit dark. So I was very surprised. So very big discussion. So the kind of the flue gas management is a very big technical issues. So for example, my Kyoto University or some university have many laboratory on incineration plant management technology. So how to deal with the fuel gas management. So, and also most of the incineration plant have the monitors, and we can check the website about the NOx, SOx, and these days dioxin, etc. on the monitor. So we can monitor that amount. And most of the cases, and once the limit over the limitation, they stop the plant, such kind of things. And another shock is the dioxin issue. So that happened many. So at that time, compared to other countries, so Japan is quite different. The emission amount from, so we have so many incineration plants. So many dioxin is from incineration plants. So only one country. Japan is quite different. And again, the engineer tried to reduce the dioxin emission. So almost all small incineration plant was closed because they cannot maintain. So high temperature is quite difficult to make in small scale incineration plant. So then the number is reduced, but now that we have now 2,000 incineration plant, but most of them become more than 50 years old. So we have to maybe replace the incineration plant. So now we have so many discussions because the population is decreasing. So most of the municipality, it's very hard to maintain by the cost and also the scale of the incineration plant. So, and now the waste from household, almost 40% is organic waste. So quite with quite moisture waste. 90% of the organic waste is water that we burned in the extraction plant. So now we expert is pushing another solution. So it's better to divide into organic or wet waste and dry waste. And for wet waste, including the organic waste, it's better to do the biogasification or some other methods to utilize as a resources. But we have so many incineration manufacturers. We have more than 20 incineration manufacturers, and they have a very big power in our field. So it's very big challenge now. Yeah, but we develop small biogasification plant in our local site, and we start a kind of promotion how we can make it. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much for the question. I think it really shows the power of lobbying groups as well as the power of path dependency. And in Canada, we have a super powerful petroleum lobby, and that is linked to our plastic industry. That makes things much more difficult in terms of policy activism. I'm going to turn to Bob. You've been waiting patiently online. Bob, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, Andy, thanks. Thanks to the presenters and thanks to you for organizing this and for the audience. A lot of them, some know me, but I was at Andy's workshop a few years ago and presented, and I worked in the ministry on EPR policy. And here I am listening to this, and I mean, Andy, you showed everyone our consumption habits. We're all there, and I'm just thinking strategically. I don't hear a lot of this, and I'm maybe interested in the speaker from Japan commenting on what the government is doing more upstream and sort of on policies to slow consumption down. And we know reuse is voluntarily done. But what happens if reuse was regulated? What would it look like, and where would we start with that? And just a side comment on folks who are discussing waste to energy. Yes, technology has advanced. Vancouver's system is way out of date, and the technology is gasification. And some of the rights to this technology actually go back to Japan, to Mitsubishi. So I'll just leave it at that. But if anyone wants to sort of tackle the sustainable consumption aspect through more advanced policy development, even in collaboration with the federal government here.
I want to get Stefan's comment first because we're running out of time, and then we'll answer both.
Yeah, thanks. I'm thinking about, so I don't have a whole lot of expertise on plastics specifically, but I know a whole lot about like policy tools or how to address issues like specific climate and energy issues. And so we heard a lot about putting the responsibility on the consumer. And I think it's problematic because it lets producers off the hook, and it also creates the illusion of action being taken. So that's one point I wanted to make. And the other one that's why I would think policy solutions like EPR are probably much more impactful, probably also harder to put in place. And lastly, on the campaigns like the one
I think, Bob,
campaigns like we've seen from WWF that Sue mentioned there. I mean, organizations like that, they have only the best intentions, but I think sometimes they're a little misguided in communication efforts, because this campaign looks to me like it creates shame. And I don't think shame is a good motivator for people. But those are the comments I wanted to contribute.
Okay, so I think there were three basic points. So one is, heaven forbid, we should think about reducing consumption. The second one is about how to incentivize or improve the possibilities for reuse. And the third one is putting more responsibility on the producers rather than just the consumers. Christoph, do you want to take any of those?
So in the, yeah, of course. So On the, yeah, it's an interesting point about so extended producer responsibilities, you're saying the aim of it is that producers, they are responsible for the products that they're putting into the market. So there is a lot of questions around, whether, how much of that is actually passed on to consumers as well, and whether, whether, who's actually ultimately paying that cost. So I think it's a good question of just, who's ultimately paying for that. Sorry, I'm totally going blank for a sec. Totally drawing a blank. Maybe I'll jump to the second question, or the question on reuse. So in the presentations today, we had some examples from different jurisdictions. And there was some interesting examples from Europe and France in particular, where they were, as part of their extended producer responsibility, they actually have a certain amount of the revenues that they're bringing in from their programming, which actually is dedicated to supporting reuse. So Sue was mentioning that a little bit. So actually about 5% of their funding that's coming in is actually looking at how they can build out those programs even more and support those. So it seems like in the session today, there was that question about whether or not that was happening in BC. It sounds like there's some conversations at the ministry and in the plan that they approved for Recycle BC, which is responsible for product packaging, that they're starting to have that conversation about ways that they can promote reuse more, but it's not there just yet. But I do think that there definitely is that possibility, and it seems like there's definitely examples around the world of where that's starting a little bit more. So I think there's some examples that we can do.
I think to get to your point, Stefan, and even to Bob's point, reuse is just not going to happen naturally. It's not going to just spring up like some entrepreneurial venture. It requires policies to require product redesign, to create fees for single-use items, to create some seed money or valley of death money for these reuse industries to get started. The secondary industries are not just going to start on their own. And so that's where, when we were talking earlier today in the workshop, having set targets for reuse, having fees that are charged on top of your deposit that can be put into reused industry, and charging the actual cost of virgin plastic. Those would be policies that would start to get the secondary market moving. As I mentioned at the outset, for too long, we've just created all this waste. We either put it in landfill, or for many years, we just exported it abroad. And so it was out of sight, out of mind, but we no longer do that. So we're reaching that point where we actually have some big changes to make. I want to invite Sue Asari Sensei to make any comments. Final comments.
Christoph and Andy have already alluded to it, but one of the speakers from Europe was talking about that separate stream. So you might have a stream of funding from producers that help to do the collection and the recycling. But then you would have another stream that might be very specific to actually drive circular economy type things. So that would be things like reuse, refill, repair. In terms of consumption, I think we also need to take a look to sort of talk about Bob's comment, what drives consumption? And sometimes it's something falls apart and we can't fix it. So you see policies like in France where they are mandating that for large appliances, there needs to be a longer warranty, the parts need to be available, they need to be sent to you within a certain period of time. So there's things like that. But there's also, and this I think is because we've had tons of marketing towards us to buy. But imagine if you could reverse that to be like, use what you have. Because sometimes we are getting rid of things, even though they work perfectly fine, just because it's like, oh, it's not fashionable anymore. So if I were going to leave, not that it should ever be up to the consumer, I definitely agree with Stefan on that point. And for a long time, climate change has been that same thing. It's like, oh, not us making these giant massive cars or giving you a system that you have no choice in. It's you because you had to use it or you bought it. And it's the same for waste. If I want to go and get cereal, can I get it without plastic? Very, very hard. So that's why we really need the systems change, but we are also a social species. So we start to mimic what we see other people do. And there is a field on fostering sustainable behavior by Doug Mackenzie Moore. And so it's a really good book if you're kind of curious about it, but that's where if you were visible in your actions, you help to bring other people along on those actions. So never be afraid to be kind of visible in your bringing your own cup or doing the other things, not because you as one individual are going to solve our waste problem, but because you can help to bring other people along on those things.
Sensei.
Okay, thank you very much. So many discussion points. But so in Japan, so maybe after World War II and during 1970 to 80, we totally lost a kind of the culture for reuse. Because before that, for example, when I was elementary kids, we have the lunch, school lunch, and every day we drink the milk by the bin. Yeah, but now almost all students in Japan, the milk carton or plastic bag milk drinking, and also in the house, of course, almost all the family or parents drink beer by can, not bin. So the younger generation don't know the reusable bin drinking. Yes, and also at the same time, when we stop the school milk by bin, the washing facility is closed. So we lost that kind of culture and the infrastructure. So it's very difficult to return that kind of culture. So when I went to other Asian countries, so please keep your culture. So once you lost, it's very difficult to get back that kind of culture. So that is I want to say. But another thing, but younger generation, especially Japanese younger generation, don't want to buy so many things. Yeah, they want to buy good things than elderly one. So they don't want to get the car. They don't want to get the brand clothes. So many people is going to the reusable shops or recycle shops, and also they are always using the application to get their favorite. So I feel that the use culture is coming. So I have very big wish to make a new culture with AI or some other technologies.
Thank you. Christoph, do you have any final comments you want to make? Or?
No, thanks.
Okay, so 2 final thoughts. There were so many things I learned from my couple of months in Japan. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but there's a really important word there called motonoi, which is the true value of things, to really appreciate the true value of things. And obviously, Western culture in our capitalist society, we focus so much on material things. But there is a kind of a circular karma, if you're kind, not everyone will be kind back, but you will reap the rewards of living a good moral life. In the same way, everything that we do, all of our materials, our food, our water, our air, as the First Nations tell us, this is sustaining us. We're so divorced from it because we buy these products. We don't realize these products are really coming from natural sources. And so nature will sustain us if we take care of it. But we're at the tipping point now of forgetting that nature is providing the sustenance to us. So hopefully we can leave today and pass on that message. Thank you so much for your kind attention. I hope to see you at the next one.